It's Tuesday, the 5th of April, 2016. I am Robin Yellow, and this is Techtasm Episode 9. James crashed his car. And with me is the James who crashed his car, James Woodall.
Mr. Yellow, feeling ashamed
Car
of
crashing.
myself.
What
Yes.
happened?
I crashed my car.
Great. Let's move on. This week's No, seriously, what happened? No, you've got to tell us.
The person in front of me didn't go when I was expecting them to, and my car didn't stop itself. Technically, it wasn't my fault.
Was it a piece of technology that should have stopped your car?
Yes. Basically, the point is I need a better car that can take over when I'm not really concentrating.
Aha. Now, I believe they are called Teslas.
Yeah.
Now, this week, James and I are going to be looking at Microsoft's Ubuntu, Bash and Linux command line. Xamarin now is free for everyone. Sony's next PS4 update. And we'll be talking about some interesting semi-autonomous lorry platoons, whatever they may be. Now, we'll be calling each of these stories to determine whether they are Techtasms, which by our definition is a blend of tech for technology and tasm for phantasm, something that exists only in a person's mind. So without further intro, it's on with the show. Peter Bright, in James's favourite publication, Ars Technica, reported this week that Ubuntu's Bash and Linux command line is coming to Windows 10. Now, the Windows 10 anniversary update will include the ability to run the popular Bash shell from Unix, along with the rest of the typical Unix command line environment. What does Bash stand for, James?
I think it's the Born Again Shell.
Born Again Shell, really?
Yep.
Okay, interesting. And what, just for explanation, what is a shell?
It's the command prompt. It's, I guess, what our slightly older listeners would think of as Microsoft DOS and those types of things. Shells and the like haven't gone away. They may have done for your average user, but for us programmers, it's more efficient to get things done in the shell than it is.
And just to be clear, you can use that's a fully functioning programming environment. You can write what's called shell script using Bash, which allows you to execute simple programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've got two tools,
I think we've got two tools here.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you wanted to script the two of them together, it's a lot quicker using a shell scripting language than it would be to build a complete program to do these kind of things. So generally, many Linux commands and systems are orchestrated by scripting and just bridging the gap between various different systems.
Well, Microsoft is calling this the Windows Subsystem for Linux, or WSL, and it is turning to Canonical, the creators of Ubuntu, for help. Now, Canonical has provided a system image containing the Ubuntu versions of various command line tools that are typically found in a Linux distribution. What is Ubuntu and what is a Linux distribution, James? Sorry, you're going to have to explain a lot of stuff to our listener in this week's episode because this is getting very technical.
Okay, I apologize to our listener. So let's get down to it. So in the early 90s, Linux was created as an open source alternative to Unix, which of course was popular at the time and so forth. And Linux itself isn't really one thing. It's a kernel, which nobody ever sees. It's the piece of software that runs directly on the hardware. And sitting on top of the Linux kernel are the user interface components and your end user applications. And what makes Linux different to Windows is that people package Linux in many different ways. And Ubuntu is, I'd say, I don't know if I'd be factually accurate here, but it's the most popular or almost the most popular distribution of Linux, which is effectively where somebody has taken all the Linux components and called it their own. Interestingly,
well, I think it's the most popular on the desktop for sure.
Absolutely.
In terms of server, whereas where most Linux is run, of course, it'll probably be Amazon's own web image or Red Hat Enterprise Linux or something like that. But yes, I think for desktop versions that you run on a laptop, I think it's the most popular.
Yeah, because Ubuntu have made great efforts into trying to simplify Linux because it is a very complicated system and it's well beyond the end user. Actually, I have to say probably the most popular distribution of Linux, I'm guessing, is Android, which
Yeah, of course, that's right. Yes, it would be. And in fact, the founder of Ubuntu, his name escapes me for a second. Mark Shuttleworth said that his bug number one, I think, in his bug log for Ubuntu was make Linux the world's most popular operating system. And he actually famously closed that bug within the last 6 or 9 months because he said now because of the proliferation of Android, that goal has now been achieved.
Oh, wow. Well, that's great. I mean, the major issue, though, with Linux is because it is so fragmented and there's no such thing as Linux because it's an idea, it's so many different things that it's a really complicated concept to grasp. And Ubuntu has done some really great things to make it easier for people to use, and it is a very friendly Linux distribution. But of course, at the end of the day, they're a corporate entity. They need to make a profit. So it makes perfect sense that they would team up with other companies, and Microsoft is great. And Microsoft have, in fact, been a major contributor to Linux, believe it or not, over the past couple of years.
Yes, that's a fact that really surprised me. And under the watch of CEO Satya Nadella, must have been, 2 years now since he took over, he has characterized his reign by removing or moving the profit center that is Windows more and more into the rearview mirror and focusing on the cloud services and Azure, the Azure cloud, to be the profit engine, and SharePoint and their other enterprise systems rather than the operating system itself. Now, earlier, James, in the pre-show, you said something very interesting, which I'd just like to probe. You said, what happens if Linux becomes Windows? What did you mean by that?
Okay, well, what's different about what these guys have done, whereas in previous attempts, is this is not a recompilation, or it's not some kind of virtual environment. What Ubuntu and Microsoft are doing is they're really running Linux components on Windows. And for a very long time, in almost every year, there's a programming meme where, will this year be the year of the Linux desktop? And I must have heard that for 10 years, if not more. And it just struck me in the pre-show, as you mentioned, that maybe Windows is the Linux desktop. And that makes so much sense, because if you can get the core of Linux that makes Linux great, but the reach of Windows, I think the Linux dream may have been achieved, certainly on the desktop world. And that to me is great, because I think Windows is a fantastic operating system. Its scripting and shell environments are pretty terrible. So if they can get a real Linux shell, developers all over the world are going to be very, very happy indeed, which it's important to keep your developers happy.
Okay, so we're going to call this one, is the fact that Windows are going down the route of trying to make Windows 10 as much like Linux as possible. Is that a Techtasm, or is it something that they genuinely believe in?
I think they genuinely believe in. We're going to see more of this. Microsoft are evolving, as we say, or I say many times. This is fantastic. Real all the way.
Okay, great. I think I probably agree with you. I think Microsoft would want to reduce the cost of developing Windows 10 going forward. And if they can keep the interface components, the UI layer that we've become used to with Windows 10, without having to really support the underlying OS, i.e. taking that from the open source world, well, that's money in your pocket.
So some really interesting news again in the world of developers, and this is a story we touched on a couple of weeks ago. So Microsoft last week, and I'm reading this from the Xamarin blog, have now announced that since their acquisition of Xamarin, and for our listener, Xamarin is the cross-platform development environment that is powered by Microsoft C# language. Xamarin
for
is
iOS
now
iOS and Android.
Yes, it's yes, of course, for the cross-platform being all of your mobile devices. It's now available completely free for developers.
Wasn't it free before? I thought it was open sourced or something. We did a piece on it a couple of weeks ago, didn't we?
The Mono framework, which is the runtime, was open source, but the bits that made it work on an Android and iOS device were not open source. So the only way to get a Xamarin program running on a device was to pay Xamarin. and to get their subscription. You could get some of the pieces, but just not enough to do, well, any actual serious work. So this to me is absolutely fantastic, and it's showing again how Microsoft are moving away from their Windows is everything mantra to really getting embedded in all these different facets of the technology world. So now all of a sudden, through a Microsoft environment and programming language, you can write code for servers, desktop, mobiles of all different platforms, and that's amazing.
I'll tell you, this really backs up the previous story about what Microsoft are doing to move towards open source and freely developed stuff that's maintained by a community. Mm-hmm. I think they want to move out of the business of having thousands of programmers supporting Windows and supporting .NET framework and all these proprietary bits of software and development environments, because the open source and free versions or community supported versions are just as competent at this stuff as they are. And I think if they reduce their cost base here, James, I can't see why they wouldn't try and migrate everything into a world of open source, into a world of free, because actually they don't make much money out of the OS anymore, and they don't make much money out of development environments anymore. They make money out of their, as I said, cloud and enterprise offerings, where they've got specific smarts and insights into the way that enterprises and corporations work, and supporting them, rather than the development community. And I think in terms of mobile, so for Xamarin particularly, they've lost the mobile battle anyway. Android and iOS own that space. Their special Windows mobile environment with their special tools for their developers, which was C# and .NET, doesn't really carry with it any users. There's no app ecosystem. There are no users. Therefore, nobody's using it. If nobody's using it, nobody's telling them where the bugs are. If they don't know where the bugs are, they're not improving the product, and therefore it's starting to fall behind. So I think this is actually a masterstroke. I can't see the commercials behind it. That's all.
Well, the term free, what I'll say, it only applies to the community edition. And to qualify for that, you have to be a tiny company with not many developers and so forth. If you're a professional developer, you still have to get the MSDN, the Microsoft Development Network subscription, which now comes with Xamarin. So if you were already an MSDN subscriber, you get Xamarin as part of that, which
so
is
it's a
great.
freemium type model. It's free for the community edition.
Yes.
It's not free for the big one. Okay, can I call it, James?
Yeah, please do.
It's a Techtasm. This is PR triumphing over reality. I think that somebody in PR at Microsoft said, why don't we announce that we're giving it away free to everyone, and then write in very small letters at the bottom, we mean the community edition. So this is a big Techtasm. It's a big part of PR. I got a whiff of old Microsoft in this. The Verge reported this week from Tom Warren that Sony's next PS4 update, which arrives today, will have game streaming for PC and Macs. Now, Sony's update will have this feature which is called Remote Play for PCs and Macs. And Remote Play allows PlayStation 4 players to stream their games from the PS4 to a Mac or PC in resolutions up to 720p, and enables you to use your DualShock 4 controller to play the games if you're connected through a USB cable. Why is this so significant? I don't know. James is about to tell us.
Can I just say, I did this at the weekend with my Xbox. And
so you've had it on Xbox for a while?
I think it's been there for at least a year on the Xbox. It's a Windows 10 thing. Right. On Windows 10, you get an Xbox app. You can connect to your Xbox. I think we can pretty much substitute this article for Xbox and Xbox One controller, and you get the same experience. I was playing Hitman over my home network, and it worked perfectly. So nice to see Sony catching up. There is one limitation with the Xbox version, which is you can only do it in your own network. I'm guessing that's a latency issue, because I imagine there's a lot of data going through the Wi-Fi. I don't see on this article whether this PS4 update is a remote thing or as in you can do it over the internet, or just a home network thing.
It doesn't actually say, but I would imagine I would imagine it's just the home network,
Okay.
simply because of, as you said, the latency. And also, when you've played it on Xbox One, does that have to be a wired network, or can it also work on wireless?
I was on Wi-Fi. I was on the kitchen table. It was great.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, it worked really well. I have to say, it's a really useful feature because, like most families, we have the main TV. And if I'm playing on my Xbox, that means my wife can't watch or do whatever it is that she wants to do. So, sometimes that's not a problem. But I've now got the opportunity to play my Xbox anywhere I want in the house.
Well, let me tell you, Robin's home-built version of the same thing. I have complete mobility of my PS4 around the house. I unplug it from the main TV and plug it into my monitor. Wow. If I need to play it somewhere else. The PS4 being so small, of course, that you can do that. But I get that it's more convenient to stream it. And as you say, doing it on a laptop on the kitchen table sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, it's really useful. I do it again. I didn't even realize it wasn't even on the PS4 until you sent the article in. So, yeah,
well, there you go. I don't think there's one to call on this one, James, so we should just spin on.
Obviously a reel. So moving on.
Is this from Ars Technica, this next article?
This might be from Ars Technica.
Of course it is.
Is there any other news story? So in the subject, we do like talking about our autonomous vehicles and so forth on this show. And when I say we like talking about that, I mean you really like talking about that.
I like a car story.
Andre Degler said in Ars Technica this morning, in fact, that platoons of lorries, autonomous lorries, are heading to Rotterdam across Europe. Essentially, just, dumbing this right down, a convoy of lorries, they're all communicating with each other, and when the front one steers, they all steer, and when the front one speeds up and slows down, they all speed up and slow down. The theory being that if the lorries are all effectively acting as a convoy, all moving and behaving at the same time, they will reduce traffic jams and congestion because effectively there's no unpredictability with it.
I think the stats on this are amazing because the lead truck gets a boost, and the following trucks get an even bigger boost from traveling in a platoon. So and that air drag, directly relates to fuel consumption. Yeah. So when you're trucking, it's all about the cost of fuel, the cost of manpower, and time. Now, if the cost of fuel is reduced because you're getting a 5% saving in wind resistance, that's 5% saving in fuel, and that could potentially be big money. And also, if you only need a driver in the first truck and the following 2 trucks or 3 trucks are fully robotized, then you reduce on manpower as well.
Oh, but think of the safety aspect as well, not just in the sense of, you're reducing the unpredictability of it. The drivers in the trucks who are not currently at the wheel can rest. And that, I can imagine, I don't know the statistics on the amount of accidents that occur from people who are tired or, and so forth, although, perhaps.
Well, the other thing to do, of course, is that the drivers. So just to be clear, you're saying there is a driver in each truck in the platoon?
The theory is that the trucks are not necessarily from the same company. As I understand it, when this was pitched a few years ago, trucks can join and leave the convoy as and when they need to.
So they don't all have to be going to the same location.
Well, yes, but if this is done on a motorway, you can join at a junction and then leave at another junction, and the platoon can keep going on. I mean,
well, of course, it does raise the prospect of the human occupants of the following vehicles being able to do other things. So that could be piecework, putting labels on boxes, as well as watching TV, because, of course, they're being paid, and why not? It could increase productivity. Again, this all goes to reducing the amount of resources that are used for fuel and increasing the efficiency of the workforce. And also, I would say it's more than that. I mean, if you've ever done a long journey, I know you travel quite a lot, James, in your Uberwagen. when it's not in the shop being fixed, is that you can get bored and you can get tired. And in fact, a change, any change, just doing something else can refresh you incredibly. So if you can just take the hand off the wheel for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, whatever, do something else, knitting, I don't know, I think it'll make the roads safer.
100%. And when this was pitched a while back, I don't mention in this article, but I know that the concept can also apply to normal vehicles as well. So if you're driving on the motorway, you as a regular car user can join one of these platoons. So this can have benefits for everybody. And
well, what's interesting about these robot driving technologies, it was one of the stories we dropped today, was about a trip that Elon Musk from Tesla made to go and see an Israeli company called Mobileye. And Mobileye is very simple system. They have a single mono camera which sits, facing forwards where the rear view mirror is situated. So it's got a high, nice view of the road ahead. And it uses the visual data through that single camera, is interpreted in real time by a special chip inside the unit, which tells it where the white lines are, tells it where vehicles, pedestrians, cyclists are, whether their intent is to move in front of you, and provides that data back to you as a warning, a flashing red light, whatever it is. But these systems are also used in autonomous vehicles to find out where the white lines are. Now, I don't know whether you know this, James, but the self-driving car feature of a Tesla is a combination of radar for vehicle placement, sonar for close vehicles, things that are about to hit you or coming very close, and this Mobileye camera system, which uses visual. And one of the things that Elon Musk recently, in a kind of parallel story, I suppose, to the truck thing, one of the things he's complaining about in the United States, apparently, the faded lane markings or missing lane markings in American roads causes havoc with the self-driving car ability. If the car can't see the dotted lines, then it struggles, because that's one of the key indicators that I'm in the right place. So it's not, we think it's all done with GPS, but it isn't. And if you're in Germany or the Netherlands, where all the lines are perfectly painted in straight lines, then you've got no problem. But in the United States, apparently, 65% of US roads are in poor condition. So there's going to have to be a major road painting endeavor before autonomous cars arrive.
It does remind me. Several years ago, I had a Mercedes which did have the line sensing technology, and every now and then, and it was really useful, if you're on a motorway and you drift slightly, the steering wheel would vibrate and it would push you back in the lane. It worked really well on motorways, but occasionally, if it would think you were maybe going over a white line when you weren't, because the line was faded, or especially as you know, in this country, if they're doing roadworks, they might paint black paint over what used to be the lines.
Yes.
And the sensor got a bit confused. So sometimes it would be pushing you around and you were perfectly in the lane. So I imagine...
Yes, and I went in a Volvo actually up north for a meeting that did exactly the same thing. It got very confused because the motorway had been repainted for smaller lanes because they were doing some work on the hard shoulder. And it was misinterpreting the painted over. Obviously, it had the camera set to near infrared or something, so it could see through the black over paint or something like that. And it does cause havoc, doesn't it? And the thing's constantly vibrating. It's really annoying.
Yeah, so we'll have to see how this develops. And
well, Mercedes say that their Drive Pilot system, which has been put recently in its recently unveiled luxury E-Class 2017 sedan, works even with no lane markings. How the hell it does that, I don't know. But apparently, it incorporates 23 sensors and takes into account guardrails, barriers, and other cars to keep in their lanes. I suppose that's the best thing to do, is to interpret the data of what other cars are doing. I mean, if it's a motorway, you're on a motorway because the GPS will tell you're on a motorway, and there are other cars following a certain track. It would take a concerted effort from other cars to confuse the system.
Yeah, absolutely. And this will only get better because they're, of course, using artificial intelligence systems which are learning all the time. So I suspect by the time a full driverless vehicle capability reaches the market, it will be in a much more mature state. And I certainly feel that you're more likely going to get into a crash doing something stupid, perhaps what I did last week, than the driverless car will, just purely from it can think a lot quicker than we can. So.
Well, I do stupid stuff all the time, James, as you know, and most of it on Techtasm. Well, that's it for this week. You can find us at facebook.com/Techtasm. You can subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher or Feedburner, and you can contact us at feedback@techtasm.com. Remember, if you're subscribed on iTunes, please give us some stars. We record every Tuesday at 2100 BST GMT, so watch out for next week's episode. This is me, Robin Yellow.
And me, James Woodall.
Asking the question, is it real or is it just a Techtasm?